welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers, and you are here for Season 4 of Wrestling at Random. And we've already had several times in Season 4. We've had big pay-per-views. We've had weekly television episodes that were quite historic. I think back to that Nitro episode with Goldberg defeating Raven to win the United States heavyweight title. Then sometimes Wrestling at Random and the randomizer pulls very random episodes of weekly television shows. And I would say that this episode of Worldwide Wrestling from 1984 falls into that category. Another episode that proves that, yes, in fact, the randomizer is legitimate and not gimmicked.
Yeah, NWA Worldwide Wrestling, September 15th, 1984 is the episode we're going to look at today. Now, NWA Worldwide was really a syndicated show where we were located in the Chicago area. It was really just an NWA syndicated show that I was taken aback that we were going to get a full episode of Mid-Atlantic, basically.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, this is an episode of Worldwide Wrestling, but it's worldwide as part of the Mid-Atlantic territory, something I'm sure you can find out much more. I know you can find out much more from my other podcast co-host and our close longtime personal friend, Mike Sempervive at the Mid-Atlantic Pod. Could fill everyone in even more on that. But yes, you and I both grew up just sort of knowing Worldwide as an NWA show / later a WCW show. But here it is firmly entrenched as a Mid-Atlantic show.
Yeah, so I was a little bit surprised and very excited because we have reviewed Mid-Atlantic in the past here in the free feed. You can search Mid-Atlantic, and it's in your back catalog right now. We've always enjoyed Mid-Atlantic episodes.
Absolutely.
It's a fantastic promotion territory for the NWA. And definitely the Mid-Atlantic Pod adds that extra layer of depth. Watching the show, listening to us, listening to that pod, gets you everything you need to know about the Mid-Atlantic territory, which when you look at what else was going on in 1984, the things we've seen from 1983, 84, 85, Mid-Atlantic is hot. This is a hot territory. Like, the place is packed. The TV is good, and the only thing there's a couple things that I'm not a fan of when it comes to Mid-Atlantic. I'm not a fan. We'll say it up top. Ron Bass, not a Ron Bass guy. We'll talk about him.
There's a lot of Ron Bass. If you recall that previous episode of Mid-Atlantic TV that we did, had to have had the highlight of Ron Bass's career with the Long Riders, Ron Bass and Black Bart and J.J. Dillon going to Ricky Steamboat's gym.
That's the best thing he's ever done in his career.
100%. We could spend the rest of our lives watching and reviewing Ron Bass moments, and nothing would even come close to approaching that.
No, so that is the only acceptable Ron Bass that I will care for. His appearances today, more in line of the things I expect of Ron Bass, and I'm not superly entertained. The other is, Paul Jones is a guy who I can be entertained by. Paul Jones. I get what Paul Jones is on the geek manager scale, but holy cow, he was horrendous in this episode. We'll get to it in more detail.
He's always horrendous. And I know
you think he's always horrendous. I can be entertained by Paul Jones.
He's terrible. Every once in a while, he's so bad that he's entertaining. But he is, and particularly, this is the golden era. At least maybe it's because I was 5 years old growing up then. So everything's the golden era when you're a kid. But you think about the managers in this era of mid 80s through early 90s, whether it be, a Jim Cornette, a Bobby Heenan, a Jimmy Hart. You get a little bit later into the 80s and early 90s, Paulie Dangerously. Paul Jones, J.J. Dillon, obviously. Paul Jones, nowhere near any of those guys, and he is all over this show.
So I'm going to ask you at the end of the show. I don't need an answer now, but I want an answer later. Uh, would you rather be watching Paul Jones or Sir Oliver Humperdinck? I want you to think about it. Don't answer now.
I thought I thought the question is going to be, because I know how much you are not a fan of this manager that I'm going to mention. Would you rather watch Paul Jones in 4 segments on a 1-hour television show, or the Grand Wizard?
Also horrendous. Woo. All right, we'll get into the show now. It's the show opens. We get highlights from the Mid Atlantic title match between Angelo Mosca Jr. and Ron Bass. And Mosca Jr. Got his leg hooked by J.J. Dillon, who's the manager on the outside. Ron Bass hits a power slam, gets the pin, and is the new Mid-Atlantic champion. He's also one half of the tag team champions.
Yeah, this is all about Ron Bass here. Again, the Long Riders pretty much dominating the Mid-Atlantic territory, it seems. It feels a bit much to have Ron Bass holding both the singles and tag team championship of your territory, but I have an open mind. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt because we've enjoyed the Mid-Atlantic we've seen, and so I'm hoping they can make something of this. We also had one David Crockett screaming and ranting and raving over this footage, which is interesting. The way the show starts is that, we see this footage, we hear David Crockett ranting and raving, and then I'm thinking, well, this is just like a voiceover, and then we're going to go to the ring. But instead, he's doing this as he has the Long Riders and J.J. Dillon at the interview position. This is a traditional studio setup for a wrestling show in the mid-'80s. It is notable that it is a standing setup, is not a sitting. I feel like we always have to note that because we see a lot of Gordon Soley sitting, or Bill Watts sitting at a desk. But here in Mid-Atlantic, they are standing in front of the NWA backdrop.
Yeah, the opening contest is Mark Youngblood taking on Doug Vines. And this is a Mark Youngblood showcase. All Mark. He hits a gut wrench suplex, some chops, some drop kicks. He does his war dance, hits a chop to the head, then comes off with the double axe handle from the top rope. Mark Youngblood gets the win in a quick squash here.
Yes, I thought Mark Youngblood looked great here. Not a guy that I've seen as much of as I would have liked. Again, you always hear about the Youngbloods, read about him in the magazines. I thought he looked awesome here. I was sad that Doug Vines wasn't a young Bob Cook. I thought for a moment that's who it was. We were going to see a great Bob Cook right hand punch. The other thing that was just funny to me was how every strike that Mark Youngblood did was described as a chop by David Crockett, even if it wasn't. That top rope double axe handle was described as a top rope double chop, which just seemed ridiculous to me. We should also note the commentary team is David Crockett on play-by-play and Johnny Weaver doing color commentary, which I believe was the same commentary team that we had for that Mid-Atlantic episode, of actual Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling TV that we reviewed.
I will say Bob Caudle was missed on this program.
Yes.
David Crockett is a great David Crockett, but he's no Bob Caudle. So definitely was missed. Johnny Weaver would have been an acceptable third man in the booth. Had to be around here because he's going to be involved in an angle later. So we'll follow along with the show. As we are told that the NWA Board of Directors will be they say the United States title is held up. There will be a tournament held in Charlotte, North Carolina to crown a new United States champion. Wahoo McDaniels is angry that the title is held up. This is serious angry Wahoo here. He's very mad. Then we cut to Ricky Steamboat, who's cutting a promo, I believe, from Steamboat's gym.
Yes.
And Steamboat blames Wahoo McDaniels for getting them into this situation. Steamboat says he will be up 10 pounds for this tournament. So coming in bulking up. Steamboat's ready to win the U.S. title.
Yeah, bulking up for a one-night 16-man tournament. I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea. Also wanted to note that before this, we're told that there is going to be a Starcade rally of some sort in Greensboro. I don't know
I
what
have
that is.
I
I'm hoping
have
this
that
will be like a
noted.
bouncy castle.
I have that noted in my notes. What is a Starcade rally?
Yeah.
Uh,
It sounds like something I would enjoy and something I really would have enjoyed in the mid 80s. That's for damn sure. We should know. We should get into, by the way, who are the men in this tournament. I was
oh,
starting.
sure. Did
I
you write
was
them down?
well. I started to, and then I was like, "Oh my God, there's 16 names, and this is leaving quick." I'm just going to take a picture of my TV screen,
Oh,
and then
perfect.
I will read off said picture as we do the podcast. So here are the names in this 16-man tournament: Dusty Rhodes, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Blackjack Mulligan, Jimmy Valiant, Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda, who will be all over this show, Carlos Colon, that young, hot, fiery babyface, just Gorilla Monsoon, Mark Youngblood, Tully Blanchard, Wahoo McDaniel, the assassin number one, who, if you were listening earlier on in this season, or maybe that was in the bonus feed, I can't remember, we saw the assassin as the Flame in a different territory. We also have Ivan Koloff, Don Kernodle, Cowboy Ron Bass, because he needs another title, the Raging Bull, Manny Fernandez, and superstar Billy Graham. Think about him wrestling, what, 3-4 times in one night?
Wow. Yeah, that's a who's who in 1984, especially. So we
What
go to
can
the
we
ring.
talk about for a second before we go to the ring? Like, why is the title held up? I know we're parachuting in here, and I'm sure they mentioned in previous episodes, but I was frustrated because we got so close to a clear understanding of what happened, but we just couldn't get there. David Crockett didn't say. Wahoo is mad, but he didn't say. Then we go to that Ricky Steamboat promo, which is by Ricky Steamboat promo standards really good, and he's pretty angry. He talks about how he thinks it's a total cop out from the NWA to send this to him in a letter instead of send a representative and visit him in person. And he talks about how there was another party involved in the match. A chair was involved. He also talks about how Wahoo is willing to do anything to win the U.S. title. And so I'm left to wonder, was Wahoo McDaniel a heel here in 1984, September 1984, Mid-Atlantic?
It sure had to be, or if it was a babyface situation, he was definitely being a heel aggressor in this
He was
because
the
of the
de
way.
facto heel.
Yeah, based on how Steamboat was describing it as well. So yeah, um, yeah, I'd like to look up the history to see what happened if we can get some clarification. I
Well,
don't
as you're
have.
doing that, also Wahoo McDaniel in his promo mentions that this is the first time any championship in the history of the National Wrestling Alliance has been held up, has been made vacant, and I find that extremely hard to believe.
No, that seems impossible. So we'll talk about this next match. I'll see if I can get some clarity on the U.S. title situation. The assassin number one that we mentioned before, he's accompanied by his manager Paul Jones. He's taking on Mike Fever.
Mike,
Beaver.
it's Fever, and it's
Okay.
hilarious because when you see the name Mike Fever, you're thinking, it's going to be some like young, hot, fiery baby face that's like one half of, we've talked about before, every territory has a knockoff of the Rock and Roll Express. And this to me, Mike Fever, the name sounds like a guy who would be one half of a tag team in like a third rate territory, knockoff of the Rock and Rolls, but instead he's just an extremely generic jobber that pretty much gets beaten down the entire match. Assassin is taking him down, grinding him, hitting knee drops, hitting leg drops, hitting punches. Fever really gets zero offense in this entire match.
Yeah, assassin. He's out wrestling him on the match. This is where the commentators are talking about the Starcade Rally. I still don't know what that
Yes.
means. Um, Assassin just working over the arm, dropping knees in a hammerlock. He's stomping on the arm. he's hoping to try to get a submission via violence on the arm, but
Yes.
he won't give up. Fever's hanging in there. Off the ropes, he punches him in, and he's got a taped up fist. And this was the controversy. David Crockett was appalled that the taped fist was used to punch Mike Fever. Assassin goes for the pin, picks him up, does this repeatedly, won't get the victory until he does a big elbow drop. And this time he lets the ref count 3 for the win.
Oh, by the way, on-air research here. I feel like this is it's like a bonus podcast episode here where we're just doing on-air research. I found the NWA Starrcade Rally 84. It is a wrestling event. This is not a parking lot party. There's no bounce castle. There's no dunk tank. This is a wrestling show at the Greensboro Coliseum, October 6th, 1984. It is a 5-match card. Nikita Koloff defeats Mike Davis in the opener. Ron Bass successfully defends the NWA Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Championship over Mark Youngblood. Manny Fernandez defeats Wahoo McDaniel by countout. We then have an NWA World Tag Team title match. Don Kernodle and Ivan Koloff defending against. This is a team you could have given me 1,000 guesses, 1 million guesses, 1 billion guesses as to who the challengers were here, and I would not have gotten it correct. It is Ole Anderson. That part, not surprising. His tag team partner, challenging for the NWA World Tag Team titles, Brian Adias.
Oh, boy. All right, we've got the NWA US 1984 title situation here, thanks to the Mid-Atlantic Gateway website. So they had the NWA held up the belt after Wahoo McDaniel and Ricky Steamboat both made a credible claim to the title. The decision was made not to return the title to either Wahoo or Steamboat, and a tournament would be held. Charlotte was the host of the tournament. Who won the tournament? There we go. The tournament was won by Wahoo McDaniel. So he defeated Manny Fernandez in the finals of the tournament.
But they still don't tell us why the belt was held up. Both men have a credible claim. Why? I need to know. Who is this third party? What did they do with the chair? Was Wahoo involved? Was he in cahoots with anyone or not? Why is this such a mystery? Damn it.
Yeah, this it does oh, here we go. There's there's a long story apparently on why this how this happened. It's a 3-part series on what happened to hold up to get us to the held up point. But whatever happened, we know that Wahoo was vindicated. He ended up defeating Mark Youngblood, Mike Rotunda, got a bye because Ivan Koloff and Dusty Rhodes went to a double disqualification, and then he defeated Manny Fernandez to become the champion. So
there you go. So from there, after we have this assassin match, really the finish is just Assassin is beating the hell out of Mike Fever. As you mentioned, keeps going for the pin, pulls him up, hits that big elbow drop. Johnny Weaver the whole time is screaming, "That ain't right," which cracked me up every time Assassin pulls Fever up. After that whole match, that whole segment, we go to one of my favorite things in wrestling during this time period. And really, I think this is the first time or one of the first times for any territory show we've reviewed where this has been left in on the video. We get localized promos as this was airing on the Lynchburg local TV station. And so we get a extremely young Tony Schiavone. I think this is the youngest and earliest we've seen Tony. Here, he's doing local promo interviews with guys for the upcoming show in Lynchburg on September 29th, or I guess September 28th. There's also a show in Danville at the George Washington High School on September 29th. But we get J.J. Dillon talking about the upcoming Ron Bass, Mike Rotunda match in Lynchburg for the Mid-Atlantic title.
Yeah, he doesn't say much, says he'll be there, he'll be ready. Paul Jones and Assassin number 1 are there. He's gonna get his mask back from Johnny Weaver.
Yeah, from the Ultimate Assassin. This is also a classic staple of syndicated wrestling where the timing sometimes is a little off between what you're seeing on the actual show and then what they're doing in the localized promos to build up the arena show in your market. Textbook example of this. It will both make more sense and become more confusing simultaneously as the episode goes on.
Yeah, this one I just had a question mark of like Assassin 1 is going to get his mask back from Johnny Weaver. I'm watching Assassin 1 wearing a mask, making these claims that he needs his mask back from Johnny Weaver. Okay.
So
and then
apparently there's sentimentality to that specific mask, but he was fine with just putting another mask on. That's not usually how losing your mask goes in wrestling, but have at it.
And there was no mention of this in the last Assassin match. So again, this was a little head scratching, but it will make sense by the end of the show. Sense in quotation marks.
Yeah, it will get more confusing and then ultimately make some semblance of sense by the end of the evening.
And then Paul Jones chimes in and says something. What did Paul Jones say here?
I have no idea. This promo was nonsensical at best. I was more still chuckling and was so happy about JJ Dillon and his promo talking about how in the logs he keeps, he knows that Mike Rotunda has defeated Ron Bass before, so he's not going to run down Mike Rotunda. He's going to give him his credit.
Tully Blanchard says that Barry Windham, he's going to bring you down a notch and leave with his money and the TV title.
Well, apparently Barry Windham's gimmick back then, or the story with him, is that he was the highest paid athlete in all of sports, not just wrestling, but in all of sports. This is also great because it's this backstage, inset promo in front of the backdrop, and like one guy enters from the left side, like Paul Jones enters from the left side, cuts his promo. He leaves again to the left side, and then immediately from the right side of the screen, here comes Tully Blanchard to talk to Tony Schiavone, like all in one motion. Like I said, I missed this. I wish more of these were kept in. It's great to see.
Yeah, this was fun. We go back to the arena where Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda are teaming up to take on two guys. I didn't quite get their names. Were you able to?
Oh, yeah. We didn't hear immediately. One of them is Gary Royal, who is sort of one of those like jobber plus guys in Mid-Atlantic at that time, like in the hierarchy of jobbers. He was definitely higher than others. I don't believe I got the name of the other, however.
Yes, I didn't either.
We have no graphics, necessary. We should mention. There are no on-screen graphics as matches are introduced.
No, we get just the whole match is a series of quick tags back and forth showing the quickness and the youth of Windham and Rotunda. Windham coming in off the top, then Rotunda comes in off the top. They're working over the arm. They hit double drop kicks. Rotunda with a drop kick of his own. Off the top, off the ropes, we get a back elbow by Rotunda. Windham tags in, big tackles. He hits a drop kick as well. And then Rotunda comes in, and the big finish is he hits his airplane spin for the victory. So
he hits his airplane spin and then invents John Cena's attitude adjustment / FU. I have a couple thoughts on this match. One, 1984 Barry Windham, awesome. Like I feel like no matter how far back you go into the early stages of Barry Windham, he still looks like he's going to be the best wrestler in the world. He's tall. He's rangy. He can move. He looks great here. Totally expected. Not surprised. Mike Rotunda looked incredible in this match. I thought he looked great. Speed, intensity, aggression. This had to have been the best night of Mike Rotunda's career. Like when I saw him here, I'm like, this dude's a can't miss top guy. He looked fantastic. The amateur wrestling, that Okada level drop kick. Like, I don't know where this version of Mike Rotunda went, but I want more of it.
Yeah, it was I don't know if this was, like, teaming with Barry Windham that with this Barry Windham that Rotunda just had to, like, give it 150% to, to put on this kinda level to hang with
Yeah.
Windham, but, yeah, because it was, when especially when you look at 1984, this, what if you watched the WWF territory, if you watched, some of the other territories we've seen in 1984, um, this was extremely quick and
Yes.
very flashy, and these guys were uh, i- these guys should be the tag team centerpiece of any of your division. Barry Windham or Mike Rotunda could have been the Ron Bass of your territory,
Oh my
tag
God.
team champion and your territory champion, easy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what seeing this as well, what it made me think was how much I then want to see Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda's WWF run in much more detail, because that's a bit of a blind spot for me. And the thing about that as well is we're basically a month away from them making the jump. This is in September of 1984.
Yeah, they did
They make
October.
Yeah, in Hamilton, October 30th, 1984, uh, Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda make their debut in the WWF as a tag team, and then they're on their way. So it's kind of crazy to see them here in the final stages of their run in Mid Atlantic and the NWA, where you see them here, and like you said, the entire promotion, the entire territory should be built around these two men.
Yeah. Oh, in how does the NWA say, like, best of luck to you guys, off to New York with you?
Yes,
Like,
we'll keep Don Kernodle and Ivan Koloff as the tag team champions. We'll keep the Long Riders as the Mid Atlantic tag team champions of this territory. Barry and Mike, we don't need you. What?
Barry and Mike start basically like in November. They sign in October, they start in November, and they're the tag team champions as of January.
Yeah.
So in January, they defeat Dick Murdoch and Adrian Adonis.
Oh man,
Uh,
talk about a match I want to see.
I want to see that match. So hopefully, someone on the bonus feed picks that, is the intentionalizer for us, so we can see that match. Wyndham and Rotunda versus Murdoch and Adonis sounds awesome. But yeah, they're on their way out here, which is surprising. As we just parachute in, you'd think this is the start of their run,
Yeah,
but
the start of their run as a tag team and the start of each of their runs as top guys, not just in the territory, but in all of the NWA.
nope. Off they go. Wyndham with a promo. Uh, and we see highlights as he's talking of Nikita Koloff and Dusty Rhodes having an arm wrestling match, because basically Wyndham wasn't there to talk about anything else than being best buddies with Dusty Rhodes and to talk about what happened to Dusty. And yeah, Dusty Rhodes and Nikita Koloff having an arm wrestling match. My notes just say Dusty's facial expressions were out of this world during this arm wrestling match. He ends up putting Nikita's arm down and wins the arm wrestling match. Nikita Koloff throws the table out of the way after losing. Ivan Koloff attacks Dusty with the chain. They have a triple team beatdown, hitting Dusty with the chain in the ribs and beating him down with it. So this was an extremely effective angle. Nikita Koloff, for those who haven't seen him, big, muscular Russian in 1984, and Dusty Rhodes, not big, muscular guy, very doughy, fat guy. So watching him defeat Nikita Koloff in the arm wrestling was great. The people loved it, and Dusty's facial expressions out of this world.
Yeah, this was great. It was also, we talk about, oh, why did Barry Windham leave? Well, maybe, I don't know, but maybe as a guy who was on his way to being one of, if not the best wrestlers in the world, and then being reduced here to just being Dusty Rhodes' friend doing play-by-play over Dusty's triumphant arm wrestling victory. He may have felt like there was a bit of a ceiling there. This also, as great as it also had big I have booking power energy, as Dusty Rhodes, as you said, the the doughy, incredibly charismatic, but doughy common man cleanly defeats the gigantic, muscular Nikita Koloff, not in a wrestling match, because that's totally believable, but cleanly defeating Nikita Koloff in an arm wrestling match stretched the bounds of credibility. As you mentioned, Dusty Rhodes' facial expressions were incredible. I always create the GIFs for the show that you see on Twitter, on Instagram, wherever else. And usually I wait till the end of the show and then I double back and like, oh, what should I pick for it? Here, I stop the show, not even at the end of this segment, but before Dusty won the arm wrestling. And the moment that you see in the GIF where Dusty's just bugging out and going crazy, I'm like, okay, nothing's going to be better than this, no matter how many Paul Jones segments there are. I'm pretty sure none of them are going to be as GIFable as this. I sent it to you immediately and said, this is it. You're like, yeah, absolutely. And so
no doubt.
Now I could watch that on a loop for hours.
Yeah, this was this was a fun angle. I definitely, it's so weird to see, like, as we get into some more jobbers here, but we look at other territories. The Mid-Atlantic jobbers are just like they're nobodies and zeros, but they're not like hilarious jobbers that we like here on the podcast.
They're competent professional wrestlers that just have just bad looks or no charisma, but they all can go for the most part. We'll see that particularly with Denny Brown later.
Yep, and in our next match here with quote unquote Bret Hart.
Yes, fake Bret Hart is back. I was excited to see fake Bret Hart back. We had him, I believe, on that Mid-Atlantic episode prior, and here he is again.
But again, competent, professional wrestler, right?
Can take a bump, can sell. Like he doesn't look like he just was pulled off the street 5 minutes before. Totally fine.
No, if you want to hear us talk more about those jobbers, those guys are over in the bonus content, because we've seen a lot of continental wrestling. We've seen they are by far some of the best jobbers we've seen. There's a lot of good stuff over there, and a lot of talk about how we like our jobbers here. But here, totally competent, and it does make for some fun wrestling here, as it's Bret Hart with Keith Larson taking on the Zambui Express, managed by Paul Jones. I have no knowledge of the Zambui Express at all.
This show did not. They didn't do anything to help you out with that, because they never even identify which man is which. We don't get a name. Nope. We don't get Zambui Express A or B, 1 or 2. We don't get names. They had names. They were called as the Zambui Express, Kareem Muhammad and Elijah Akeem. Kareem Muhammad was Ray Candy. I would say the more well-known of the two. But yeah, they're just here. It kind of reminded me of when late stage Gordon Soley would call matches in WCW, and Harlem Heat would be on, and no matter who was in the ring, he would just call each guy the Harlem Heat. He never bothered identifying Booker T or Stevie Ray. Kind of had that vibe here. They are huge, gargantuan men.
Gigantic, yeah.
I'd say legitimately each at least 6'6", 350. Giant men wearing like olive green sweatpants and camo tank tops. This goes on for a long time. They're not great, but they're throwing these dudes around, and it's entertaining enough for just the visual.
Yeah, I mean, a huge clothesline starts the match, turns the guy inside out. Then they do one of my favorites, the fat guy sandwich spot, where the two fat guys come from the sides and squish the little guy in the middle.
The big smush, always good.
Double clothesline on Larson. Gets hit with a backdrop. One of the Zambui Express miss an avalanche in the corner. That allows Hart to tag in. But a punch to the face cuts Hart off quickly.
Immediately, he gets the hot tag. Like, it's weird that they're building like this hope spot hot tag, and you're expecting fake Bret Hart to run wild, and then he immediately gets decked with a hard forearm, and that's over.
A slam, A running elbow drop murders this Bret Hart, and Zambui
Huge.
Express gets the pin. This was a gigantic elbow. Loved it.
It reminded me of I believe we saw it on one of the All Japan shows when it was a younger Abdullah hitting his awesome running elbow drop out of the corner. That's what this was. David Crockett was incredible here, screaming, "No, no," as the Zambui Express is hitting the elbow drop. Fine for what it was. Maybe went a little too long, but for a team that I had no idea of, I enjoyed watching them squash fake Bret Hart.
One half of the World Tag Team Champions, 1/3 of the World Six-Man Tag Team Champions. It's Don Carnodle taking on Dennis Brown.
Dennis Brown, I guess this was very early on in his run because this was before, I guess he was familiar enough to be named Denny.
Denny? Yeah, we
He
just
was-
it's
was
we
just
met him here.
He was just Dennis Brown, and he's a perfect example of what you talked about earlier. And he's maybe even above a Jobber Plus. I mean, he's a guy who you would see when he'd have the NWA
light heavyweight
junior
title.
Yeah, exactly. The junior title. I believe he was the one that the Great Muta won the NWA junior title from. Remember on that
Florida?
Yeah, that special that we reviewed where Muta was under a different name early on in his
the Ninja.
The Ninja, exactly, the Ninja. But yeah, Denny Brown, like a really good wrestler, really technically sound, good fire, sells well, everything, but he just doesn't. His body isn't terrible, just doesn't have a good look. He's just an 80s generic looking guy with a mustache. So like he's only going to get to a certain point at that time in particular. But every time I've seen him on any show we've reviewed, I've really enjoyed watching him.
I enjoyed Don Carnodle here. Anytime I
Yes.
get to see him like in his prime here, this is good stuff. And you could tell why he's the top of the class here in Mid Atlantic. He comes out, misses a crossbody, and the crowd loved it as I did as well.
The spot was great because he goes. He's not like a huge guy, but he's not a junior heavyweight, and he goes for this big running crossbody. Denny Brown drops down with like the best intensity you've ever seen on a drop down. Carnodle misses wildly, and like you said, the crowd goes nuts. You've never seen a crowd reaction to a spot like this before.
Brown hits a shoulder block, comes at him again, but gets caught by a Carnodle power slam. Long delayed vertical suplex by Carnodle. Carnodle does an awesome sell here as Denny punches him in the midsection. And he's selling it, flailing with his entire body, just showing how the gut punch is rippling through his entire body. This was a masterclass here. I loved that. Brown fires away with more punches in the corner. He charges in, but Carnodle sidesteps him, and he hits the buckles. Carnodle with a clothesline from the middle rope, then puts on the Cobra Clutch. Brown is out, and your winner, Don Carnodle.
Yeah, this was super fun. This was, for what it was, really entertaining. Carnodle is like the high-end example of what we always talk about, where there's like that tough, grizzled vet that's, you know, an upper mid-card, or in this case, even main event guy. It feels like every territory had them, and Carnodle was at or near the top of the list of those type of guys. Also interesting in that his, you see him use the Cobra Clutch here for the win. His entry into Mid-Atlantic was as part of Sergeant Slaughter's Cobra Corps, teaming with Sergeant Slaughter and Private Jim Nelson. Also noteworthy that he got his start in wrestling by accepting a shoot wrestling challenge from Bob Roop. Roop defeated Carnodle by submission, but Carnodle's skills impressed Ole Anderson and Gene Anderson, who then offered to train Carnodle for free. Definitely check out a lot of what Mike Sempervive has done in terms of honoring and writing about the career of Don Carnodle. He did quite the deep dive, and it's good stuff.
It's funny the parallels between him and Private Terry Daniels here.
Yes, I feel like one man certainly was a better wrestler than the other.
Their careers might have started with some similarities.
Yes,
but then could not have diverged more.
It was the widest branches that were somehow wide as apart branches that were somehow still attached to the same tree trunk.
Tony Schiavone, child Tony Schiavone, runs down more local matches coming to the Lynchburg Armory. Mike Rotunda with a promo about his Ron Bass title match.
A very
Talks-
wooden promo that maybe answered the question from earlier. Why isn't Mike Rotunda a top guy? It may be because of this promo. Again, that's why managers existed, so you could give him a manager. He looked the part here, but he did not sound the part.
It never really it took him it took him till he was way past his physical prime to actually get that part
Yes.
down.
Well, and it also took him having a character who the idea was that this guy is boring. As
Yes.
IRS, the taxman, that was his character. And at that point, he then was able to tap into his natural anti-charisma and pull that off convincingly.
Yeah, because you think you remember him having personality as part of the varsity club, but
Incorrect.
it's because of the other personalities around him that he was just elevated into. Oh, I enjoyed the varsity club and those personalities, but it's no, he was just as wooden as this promo is here.
Absolutely. No, he was the beneficiary of personality, charisma, whatever you want to call it. You should call it charisma osmosis. That when he was out there with Kevin Sullivan and Dr. Dusty Flames, but no, left to his own devices, a bit of a black hole. We also then have another Paul Joe, or no, this is before that. We have the Ultimate Assassin. So this is the most confusing part. They continue this story that we talked about earlier of a man taking the mask of the assassin.
In the first promo, we're told Johnny Weaver.
Yes.
And then here we're told Ultimate Assassin.
Ultimate Assassin, who is an old guy wearing the assassin's mask, who sounds exactly like Johnny Weaver, who's been calling this entire show. And we were told it was Johnny Weaver earlier, but here it is supposed to be a mystery that it is, in fact, Johnny Weaver. We go from there. Well, then from there, we've got a quick Barry Windham promo. It's really nothing. We go from there, and Johnny Weaver is in the locker room with Paul Jones and the Assassin. This is apparently something that they just started the previous week. They talked about it earlier on in the show about how the fans really responded well to Johnny Weaver being in the locker room, interviewing the Long Riders after Ron Bass's Mid-Atlantic title win last week. So here again, by popular demand, he's going into the locker room. This time he is here to talk to Paul Jones and the Assassin, and he is dogged in his questioning of Paul Jones about why the Assassin's wrist, why his fist is still taped up.
Yeah, how long will this fist be used by the assassin? And Weaver keeps asking, how long are you going to have it taped up? And he's going to use it. And Jones says, you're aggravating us. The assassin then tries to attack Weaver, but Johnny Weaver grabs the assassin by the mask. The mask comes flying off him. Assassin's covering his face as Weaver's looking at the mask he just pulled off as we cut back to the ring. So
the best part of this, and something I love in pro wrestling, is when in the middle of a fight or some sort of non-in-ring, non-ringside altercation, someone busts out a wrestling move. This is like in a movie where there's a bar fight and someone hits a Frankensteiner and then hits someone over the head with a pool cue. In the middle of this, we have Johnny Weaver just hitting a snap mirror on the assassin to then pull his mask off. I just love that. It's like they were playing Backstage Assault for PlayStation.
So the mystery is now solved. So
in reverse.
So we've
That's my brain.
So if this had aired as like the second segment of the show, the entire show makes sense.
Yes.
Because this aired at the end, everything's out of order and it's weird. And so now everything makes, oh, okay. That is Johnny Weaver as Ultimate Assassin, making fun of the assassin. Got it, because he took his mask at this moment. Got it. Okay, so it all made sense now, but it was
Well,
really weird parachuting in and just watching this out
yes.
of order was weird.
It may have also made sense in other markets, maybe in other markets where they didn't have the Ultimate Assassin
Sure.
against the Assassin coming up in a week or two on TV. You wouldn't have had those promos out of order because they wouldn't have happened, and you just would have had this segment. It totally would have made sense. But to the fine people of Lynchburg, they had to be confused. We then go from there to what is, as far as matches go, the de facto main event of this show. It is also a pairing of two wrestlers that I feel like on every card that they were ever on together, they wrestled each other. It is Black Bart taking on Sam Houston. This to me was the third match on every NWA show for at least 6 years.
Yeah, these guys, I feel like they've wrestled 1,000 times. This is again a very young and very skinny Sam Houston.
Even by very young and very skinny Sam Houston standards, he was already like right there with Kendall Windham on the, they're like a sheet of paper. If they turn sideways, you can't see him, that sort of deal. But yeah, this is before Sam Houston is sort of even halfway a guy.
The match starts with headbutts by Bart, and he quickly puts Houston in the tree of woe. And now Weaver's back on commentary from this confrontation with the assassin in the back. Weaver then basically just starts cutting a promo over this match, saying, come get it, assassin, if you want the mask. Bart hits a power slam and gets the pin in a quick squash match. This was really a nothing.
Well, this only existed to further the angle, to have a couple of things, to have David Crockett just so overjoyed about what he saw in the previous segment. He says, I love it. And then he's just chuckling and laughing to himself throughout this match, randomly saying, I love it. And he's not talking about Black Bart versus Sam Houston. He's just so loving what happened in the angle earlier. And then, as you said, also it serves to allow Johnny Weaver to come back to the set. We see an inset promo. It's like he's cutting a promo, he's talking, but we see a nice little inset box, and we see him talking, and then he's getting so worked up that he says he has to be professional and excuse himself, and so he leaves.
Paul Jones and the Zambui Express talk to David Crockett. They don't say much. Jones rants that his men are coming after Weaver, so he's bringing the Zambui Express to help the assassin come after Weaver.
Well, I feel bad for the Zambui Express because at one point in this promo, Paul Jones says, there are only 2 stars in Mid-Atlantic, me and the assassin. Meanwhile, his 2 375-pound assassins in their own right are just standing there having to just look like total dorks. They're not stars.
Yeah, and that I hope that led to. I hope that was so blatant that it had to be leading to dissension within the Paul Jones army. I assume.
I hope so. I had to leave it to a face turn for the Zambuis.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what are we doing here?
Exactly. So
I did enjoy, and again, I'm not sure which Zambui it was because I don't think we've ever seen either of them, and they were never identified individually. But one of them ends the promo by saying over and over, "You can't trust a redneck." And I enjoyed that greatly.
So that's it for the show. This edition of Worldwide. Favorite thing on the show for you?
And I honestly think, as weird as it sounds, my favorite thing on the show was Mike Rotunda being awesome in that match. Everything about Rotunda and Barry Windham as a tag team, but particularly Mike Rotunda. The other thing about this show that I just kind of want to give a shout out to and give them credit for is that this is an episode of Mid-Atlantic where, other than in the arm wrestling deal, which I guess maybe the facial expressions of Dusty are the best thing on this show, but the arm wrestling deal is a recap. We see Tully Blanchard, but that's only in the localized promos. There's no Ric Flair appearing here at all. So for a Mid-Atlantic show that was in some ways short of a lot of the most charismatic and biggest stars, this was still a really entertaining, easy to watch hour of TV. So credit to them putting together a show that was still really fun.
Yeah, super easy, fun hour show. I think I enjoyed, I do agree with you. The Barry Windham Mike Rotunda match was probably the most fun, but I think my favorite thing might be the Carnodal Denny Brown match. I thought that was a really solid squash match. Got a little bit of time and pretty good there. And of course, Dusty Rhodes' facial expressions by
Yes.
far the best thing on the show.
Yes.
Worst thing on the show.
Man, I don't know. I'm trying to think. There was nothing on this show that I really hated. And I guess coming into it, the thing that I would have thought would be by far the worst thing on this show would be the proliferation of Paul Jones segments. But for the first time in 4 seasons, plus the bonus feed here on this podcast, and the many times that we've seen Paul Jones, I can honestly say that I didn't mind him here. He's a dork. He's not great, but for me, it worked on the show in a way that usually it doesn't. So he was totally fine. I can't think of anything that I really hated.
Yeah, I think there's nothing there's nothing egregious on here. I'd say the localized promos putting the Johnny Weaver thing out of order is
Yes.
probably the most frustrating thing, but I didn't hate it. But it was the most frustrating thing. I think I also did not like not getting a little bit more backstory for some of these things.
Yes, particularly the U.S. title thing. I would say
Correct.
that would be, if I had to pick something, it would be the lack of clarity that we got on the U.S. title thing. And the thing that was most frustrating about it, the aspect that was the most frustrating, was that we got so close to getting an explanation, but we never did.
Especially because it seems like, based on what I was trying to read on air, this is a long this was a long rivalry deal here. This was a big thing. You could have summed it up with at least a few sentences to try to do, or had Wahoo kind of walk us through that in his promo, even.
Hell, have
Some of the
Barry come out
highlights.
again. He got to do play-by-play over one thing earlier. Maybe before he's out of the territory, we can have him explain the U.S. title situation while he's at it.
But overall, highly enjoyed, as I always do, the Mid Atlantic shows. They are a breeze and easy to watch, and definitely would have been one of my favorite territories if this was my territory growing up.
Absolutely. No, I agree. Super fun. Nothing incredible. Not a ton of huge stars. No blowaway matches, but an easy way to spend an hour. And it passed my litmus test of when I watch a show from a territory that I didn't grow up on. And this is, again, adjacent to the stuff I grew up on. But, the first wrestling that I watched, this isn't it. But if I watch it through those eyes of like a 5-year-old, would this have hooked me on pro wrestling? With this territory, with this type of presentation? And I can say with a great deal of certainty that, yeah, I think it would have. I think I would have been hooked. I would have come back. I would have been begging my parents to let me go to wrestling shows in the Mid-Atlantic territory if I had seen an episode like this when I was a kid.
And with that, we're going to call it a podcast. We want to make sure that you're interacting with the show. Tell us what you think about some of the shows we're reviewing here. You can do that via social media at Wrestle at Random on the Twitter. Same for Instagram, Facebook.com/Wrestling at Random as well. If you don't use social media, you can always send us an email, wrestlingatrandom@gmail.com. And you can interact with us via YouTube, which people like to do. The video version of this podcast goes up the day after the audio version. So the podcast goes up to all your podcast feeds every Sunday. The next day on Monday afternoon, the video version where you can see Adam and I doing this exact same podcast.
And you can still hear it, though, too. We should mention, just for clarity's sake, in case anyone is overly literal like me and wasn't sure, the video version has the audio as well. You don't have to sync up the two. It's all good. It's all there. And yeah, for some reason you want to see our faces saying the exact same things that you just heard us say in audio. Have at it. People like that for some reason.
People like to consume their podcast that way. That's totally fine. And you can interact with the show there as well. Comments, etc. We always read and respond as often as we can. And if you want to support the show, there's 2 ways to do that. One is to go to our Patreon, patreon.com/wrestling at random. There you can sign up and get a bonus episode of this podcast every single week. Completely different shows. Some incredible shows. We just did a review of a show from Memphis, and you want to talk about a territory that would get me to go to a live show. That was that show.
Yes.
And holy cow, one of my favorite ones we did. You guys can't hear it unless you go over to the bonus content, sign up. It not only unlocks that episode, but all of the episodes in the back catalog. We're close to 100 episodes.
97 as we record this right now. If you're listening in linear fashion, there are 97 episodes of Wrestling at Random that if you've never subscribed to the bonus feed before, you have never heard. And like Jeremy said, you subscribe, it immediately unlocks all 97 and counting of those episodes. You have access to them right away.
And if you don't want to go to Patreon to do that sign up, that's fine. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, you hit the subscribe button right there. That will unlock all those episodes we just described for you right in the podcast player you're using right now, Apple Podcasts. That would also allow you to access all of the back catalog of the bonus content. And if you are signing up via Patreon, there's another option you can do. Not only do you get the bonus content, but you can bump yourself up for 1 month and say, hey, I want to be the randomizer. I want to be the intentionalizer. I want you guys to review this show here. You can do that. We'll review it. You bump yourself back down to the tier where you continue to get all of the bonus content. And we review a show of your choosing, always the funnest part of the bonus content.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The intentionalizer always brings it, never disappoints. So yeah, if you not only want to support the show and hear those bonus podcasts, but you want to decide what we want to listen to, we're always here for it. Always excited.
If you can't support the show financially in these times, totally get it. There's another way you can support us. That's by word of mouth. Wrestling fans know other wrestling fans, so make sure you tell them about the podcast. Show them how to subscribe to the podcast. Tell them about the YouTube channel. Get them to listen to our show, and that's a free way you can support and continue to grow this podcast, and we continue to bring it to you every single week during season 4 here of our podcast. We couldn't have done 4 seasons without your support so far. So please, thank you and keep it going. We really appreciate it. And with that, we're going to call it a podcast. Adam, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Randomizer, for bringing us some more worldwide / mid-Atlantic goodness. Thank you, Mike Rotunda, for having the performance of your life on an episode that we got to watch. Maybe if only for 1 week, changed everyone's minds. I'm hoping that maybe someday, Jeremy, the Randomizer will bring us a similar all-time performance from Greg the Hammer Valentine just for you.
The Randomizer does not make things appear out of thin air that do not
a miracle
exist
worker
in the wild. It has to exist in the wild for it to select. So do not see that coming. But yeah, with that, we are wrapping it up. I want to thank everyone for listening. Talk to you again next time.